The air in Ouagadougou crackled with anticipation. For days, rumors had swirled, but the official announcement from the Economic Community of West African States landed like a thunderclap. New, stringent sanctions targeting Burkina Faso's economy. The message from the regional power bloc was clear: comply with our demands for a swift return to civilian rule, or face the consequences. But what happens when a regional power bloc tries to pressure a young, defiant leader? And he hits back harder. This isn't just a story about political pressure. It's about a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess where the moves are swift and the outcomes uncertain. At the center is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's charismatic leader, who received the news of ECOWAS's actions not with fear, but with a steely resolve to respond. This is the story of a moment that sent shockwaves through West Africa, demonstrating that in the complex world of international relations, the expected script can be thrown out in an instant. It's about a nation's sovereignty, a leader's defiance, and the ripple effects that challenge established norms. If you're ready to see how global power dynamics are shifting and how unexpected responses can change the game, subscribe to Magnificent Story and ring the notification bell. The Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, is a powerful regional bloc comprising 15 member states. For decades, it has played a significant role in promoting economic integration and, crucially, intervening in political crises to restore stability and democratic rule. When coups occurred in member states, ECOWAS often responded with condemnation, mediation, and, if necessary, sanctions. In the case of Burkina Faso, ECOWAS had grown increasingly impatient with the transitional government's timeline for returning to constitutional rule. Following the second coup in 8 months, led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the bloc demanded a swift transition, setting deadlines that Traoré's administration deemed unrealistic given the ongoing fight against extremist groups and the need for national reconciliation. Citing these delays and persistent security concerns, ECOWAS brought down the hammer. The sanctions imposed were stringent, targeting key economic sectors and financial transactions. They included the freezing of state assets in ECOWAS central banks, restrictions on commercial and financial dealings, and potentially even a blockade of goods. The potential impact on Burkina Faso was severe. As a landlocked nation heavily reliant on trade with its neighbors, these measures threatened to cripple its already fragile economy, exacerbate poverty, and potentially incite public discontent against the military government. ECOWAS was leveraging its economic power to force a political outcome. Have you ever felt like an external force, whether a large institution, a powerful group, or even another person, was trying to dictate terms to you or your community, imposing their will without fully understanding your situation? This was the pressure Burkina Faso faced, a test of its sovereignty against the might of a determined regional bloc. At the heart of this confrontation stood Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a young, relatively unknown artillery officer before the September 2022 coup. He quickly cultivated an image as a man of action and principle. His signature red beret became a symbol of his commitment to the military and his connection to the soldiers fighting on the front lines against extremist groups. Traoré's rise to power was fueled by frustration within the military and the population over the previous government's perceived failure to address the escalating security crisis. He tapped into a deep well of discontent with external interference and a desire for Burkina Faso to chart its own course. His rhetoric was strongly anti-imperialist, often criticizing foreign powers and international institutions for what he saw as continued attempts to control African nations. For Traoré, the conflict with ECOWAS wasn't just about a timeline for elections. It was about sovereignty and priorities. He argued that the immediate focus had to be on stabilizing the country, reclaiming territory from extremist groups, and ensuring the safety of citizens. He viewed ECOWAS's insistence on a rapid return to civilian rule as unrealistic and potentially destabilizing, especially if it diverted resources and attention from the security crisis. When the news of the stringent ECOWAS sanctions reached the presidential palace, the mood was not one of panic or capitulation. Instead, it was marked by defiance. Traoré and his advisors saw the sanctions as a direct challenge to their authority and a confirmation of their belief that ECOWAS was not acting in Burkina Faso's best interests. There was no discussion of bowing to the pressure. The focus was immediately on how to respond swiftly and decisively. But ECOWAS underestimated the resolve of this young leader. They expected compliance or negotiation under duress. They were about to receive a response that would not only challenge their authority but also signal a potential shift in regional dynamics. While regional diplomats were still processing the implications of the ECOWAS sanctions, President Traoré launched his swift counterstrike. His response was multi-pronged, designed to immediately push back against ECOWAS while simultaneously strengthening his position domestically and internationally. The first and most visible element was a televised address to the nation. Delivered with his characteristic intensity and directness, Traoré did not mince words. He condemned the sanctions as unjust and counterproductive, arguing they would harm the very people ECOWAS claimed to be helping. He accused the regional body of being a puppet of foreign powers, more concerned with external agendas than with the genuine security and well-being of the Burkinabe people. They speak of democracy while imposing hardship on our people, Traoré declared, his voice rising with emotion. They demand timelines while our citizens are under attack. This is not about constitutional rule, this is about control. Burkina Faso will not be dictated to. The speech was a masterclass in populist rhetoric, tapping into deep-seated frustrations with perceived external interference and regional bodies seen as out of touch with the realities faced by ordinary citizens. He framed the sanctions not as a measure against his government, but as an attack on the entire nation, an attempt to punish citizens for supporting a leadership that prioritized their safety and sovereignty. The impact was immediate and powerful. Within hours of the speech, spontaneous demonstrations erupted in Ouagadougou and other cities across Burkina Faso. Crowds gathered, waving Burkinabe flags and chanting slogans condemning ECOWAS and expressing fervent solidarity with President Traoré. The sanctions intended to isolate Traoré had instead galvanized public support behind him. Like this video, if you believe leaders should prioritize their nation's sovereignty above external pressure, especially when facing critical internal challenges. Traoré's swift and defiant public response set the tone, signaling that his government would not be intimidated by economic pressure and was prepared to challenge ECOWAS's authority head-on. But this was just the beginning of his counterstrike. Recognizing that the ECOWAS sanctions were designed to isolate Burkina Faso, President Traoré's administration moved swiftly on the diplomatic front to counter this strategy. While ECOWAS expected Burkina Faso to be cut off, Traoré was already building new bridges. Envoys were immediately dispatched to countries outside the traditional ECOWAS sphere of influence. The focus was on nations that had expressed sympathy for the security challenges faced by Sahelian countries and were less aligned with the perspectives of Western powers often seen as influencing ECOWAS decisions. This included countries within the broader Sahel region that were not ECOWAS members, as well as potential partners in other parts of the world. Crucially, Traoré's government accelerated discussions with alternative security partners. For months, there had been speculation about Burkina Faso exploring options beyond its traditional alliances, particularly with certain non-Western powers known for their willingness to provide military assistance with fewer political conditionalities. The imposition of ECOWAS sanctions provided the impetus to finalize these arrangements with remarkable speed. While specific details remained confidential, reports soon emerged of new military cooperation agreements being signed. These agreements reportedly included provisions for training, equipment, and potentially the deployment of foreign security personnel to assist Burkina Faso in its fight against extremist groups. This represented a clear and significant pivot in Burkina Faso's defense strategy, moving away from traditional partners towards those offering support without the political demands that ECOWAS and some Western nations had insisted upon. This rapid diplomatic maneuvering and the forging of new alliances demonstrated Traoré's determination to ensure that Burkina Faso would not be isolated by ECOWAS actions. It was a bold move that signaled a willingness to reorient the nation's foreign policy in pursuit of its security and sovereignty objectives. Beyond the diplomatic and security maneuvers, President Traoré's administration also focused on a strategy of domestic defiance to counter the ECOWAS sanctions. Recognizing that the sanctions aimed to cripple the economy and incite public discontent, the government announced a series of measures designed to promote self-reliance and mitigate the impact on ordinary citizens. These measures included initiatives to boost local agricultural and industrial production, aiming to reduce reliance on imports from ECOWAS member states. The government also announced efforts to diversify trade partners, actively seeking new markets for Burkinabe exports and alternative sources for essential goods from countries not participating in the sanctions. These domestic economic measures were framed as a demonstration of national resilience and a commitment to charting an independent economic course. They were intended to show the Burkinabe people that their government was actively working to protect them from the negative consequences of the sanctions and that the nation could withstand external pressure through collective effort and ingenuity. While these measures sent a powerful message of defiance, their long-term effectiveness faced significant challenges. Burkina Faso's economy is deeply integrated with the ECOWAS region, and diversifying trade partners and boosting local production on a large scale would require substantial investment and structural changes. The sanctions were still likely to cause hardship, and the success of these domestic initiatives would be crucial in determining whether Traoré could maintain public support in the face of economic difficulties. Comment below. What do you think is the most effective way for a nation to resist external economic pressure and build a resilient economy? Is it through self-reliance, diversifying partnerships, or a combination of strategies? This focus on domestic defiance was a critical component of Traoré's swift response, aiming to turn the challenge of sanctions into an opportunity to foster national unity and economic independence. President Traoré's swift and multifaceted response sent shockwaves far beyond the borders of Burkina Faso. ECOWAS, which had likely anticipated a period of quiet deliberation or even negotiation under pressure, was clearly caught off guard by the speed and boldness of his counterstrike. Within the regional bloc itself, Traoré's defiance created divisions. Some member states, particularly those facing their own internal security challenges or harboring a degree of sympathy for the Sahelian country's struggles, expressed unease about the severity of the sanctions and the potential for further regional instability. Others, firmly committed to upholding ECOWAS's Charter on democratic principles and regional integration, maintained that the sanctions were a necessary tool to deter future coups and maintain the bloc's credibility. The international community watched with a mixture of concern and fascination. Western powers, who had largely supported ECOWAS's efforts to pressure the military regimes in the Sahel, found themselves in a difficult position. Traoré's rapid pivot towards alternative security partners, particularly certain non-Western powers, was not in their strategic interests. Yet, their ability to directly influence the situation was limited, especially given the apparent popular support Traoré seemed to command domestically. The situation in Burkina Faso became a critical test case for the effectiveness of regional blocs like ECOWAS in enforcing democratic norms and security cooperation in a rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape. Traoré's swift and defiant response demonstrated that military leaders in the Sahel were increasingly willing to challenge the authority of these blocs and seek alternative paths, potentially leading to a fragmentation of regional security architectures and a reorientation of alliances. The question remains, will Traoré's defiance lead to stability and a new era of sovereignty for Burkina Faso, or will it result in further isolation and fragmentation in the region? The answer has implications far beyond this West African nation. President Ibrahim Traoré's swift and defiant response to ECOWAS sanctions marked a significant moment, demonstrating a new era of assertiveness from some African leaders. It highlighted a willingness to challenge established regional power structures and seek alternative paths for national sovereignty and security. This event offers broader lessons about the dynamics of international relations. It shows that even powerful regional blocs can be challenged when leaders are willing to leverage domestic support and forge new international alliances. It underscores the importance of understanding local contexts and priorities when applying external pressure. The implications for regional stability and international relations are profound. Traoré's actions could inspire other leaders to adopt similar approaches, potentially leading to a more fragmented regional landscape but also creating opportunities for new partnerships and a rebalancing of global influence. 4 more deep dives into the political trends shaping our world and the leaders who are challenging the established order. Subscribe to Magnificent Story and hit the notification bell. Next week, we explore another unexpected geopolitical development: how a small nation's bold move in international court challenged the power of global corporations and set a precedent for environmental justice.